And the first question, well, the first topic is, what is globalization? So I'm going to pick on you, Alexei. Do you want to start us off with what that means to you and what it means to Awesome as well?
Yeah, sure. Well, Awesome started out more than 3 years ago out of Singapore, initially focusing on Singaporean market. And even while working in Singapore, we already saw the impact of globalization, if we are talking about the socio-economical trend, right? Because we, like a lot of our clients in Singapore, for example, are foreign clients, so it's the entrepreneurs from somewhere else who want to, for example, start business in Asia, and they would open the company in Singapore. So like we are working with international entrepreneurs from early on, and then obviously we've also expanded into the UK and then into Hong Kong, and because like we see that there is a need for internalization, for globalization. Like there are a lot of entrepreneurs who start the business in their home country, and then at some point they either reach some limitations in there, so they want to expand, and or they are looking into additional growth levers, and then they enter foreign markets as well. So yeah, I guess for the purposes of today's webinar, like we would like to look into the globalization as a trend for the businesses going global. What are their needs? Like why are they doing it? Like what are the things that they should be keeping in mind while they're doing it, and like how all the companies on this call can support them on their journey.
Great. Does anyone have anything else they would like to add? Please speak up.
Well, I suppose with globalization, what's interesting now is the globalization accelerated, didn't it? Because we had more and more flights, so people could go to different countries a lot quicker in the past, and now we've got much better internet connections pretty much everywhere around the world. That means you can do a lot of this remotely, and of course with COVID, it means you've had to do that remotely. So globalization in terms of the exchange of ideas, and not just the arrival of people at airports, is become the currency, hasn't it? It's all about knowledge and access to the right information at the right time. Hence why we're doing this. I should think the new globalization is, how do we ensure that everyone has access to the same means of information and knowledge, or in COVID cases, the vaccine, right? So that everyone can benefit from that. So the pros and cons to it, but I think generally it's a good idea that people should all have access to as much information as they require, or knowledge that they require, whether you're learning at school level or university level, or if you're learning how your product or service can fit best into a different market, because it might not be the market that you're in, and certainly that's the case with a lot of the entrepreneurs and founders that we work with.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think globalization and digitalization go hand in hand. I think 50 years ago, if you're a UK-based company and you wanted to set up in Singapore, you would have to get on a flight, go there, hire people, and nowadays you can sell your products in an afternoon all around the world. The borders to doing business are so much broader now, and I think that's one. As Tony mentioned, that's one thing which really compressed over the past 18 months with COVID is, I live in the countryside, and even the local butcher here now has a website, and they would never have had a website, 2 years ago, because why would they need one, right? They got all of their traffic through footfall, but you could, buy their products from Timbuktu now. So I think that's one big thing which has really changed throughout COVID, is this move online, this move to digitalization. And it means that where you may have just sold your products or goods locally in the UK or even in Europe, you can now sell them all around the world. It's much easier to do business than it was even 5 years ago.
I think like the big theme around it all is really opportunity. When you say globalization, I think opportunity. There are a lot of like not I wouldn't say a lot of downfalls. There are downfalls to trading internationally, risks that you need to consider and so on. But I think the opportunities and the access to different markets and people, whether that's digital or just being able to reach your physical products worldwide. I think that globalization just screams opportunity. So I find that quite exciting. As we, even as simply that, as we enter new markets. But yeah, just even being able from our side, when we started up our business, it was, we didn't really put any money into marketing, and it was a load of word of mouth, and a lot of people from around the world then started, talking about us, and it ended up being, and we ended up serving 70 different countries, all with minimal kind of ad spend and so on. So it is quite exciting how much, how much smaller the world seems now that so much has, there's so much digital, sides to business, and being able to access so many different markets and people by a click of a button, essentially.
I think you're right. I think that the only thing I'd quickly add, thinking about it, is that although we talk about obviously doing things remotely now and virtually, I think there's still a huge amount of benefit from being places physically. And it reminds me of, I was working with a South Korean company at the moment this week, and they've managed to get one of the co-founders out here. And so we're arranging various introductions for him into his market space, because I think it's also very important, of course, to understand the culture in which you're selling into, whether that's on a consumer brand or whether it's direct to business. And a lot of that can't be done remotely, because you don't pick things up. You don't pick up human cues as much. You're not able to go into deep dives. The call might drop, so you might miss something important. So I think it's still very important that you do it physical and digitally. But I think obviously with concerns around the environment now and carbon footprint and everything else, I think people are starting to think more deliberately before they move to a new destination, before they move into a new market. And there are tools like our own plug that you can use to do that, and practical tools like everyone else who's talking on the panel to help you do the practical moves and the practical acts of conducting business in a location more effectively.
Yeah, but I think you're completely right on face-to-face communication, and it's one thing. I mean, this is face-to-face. This is in real life, and I think this would be so much easier if we all sat in a room, because, like you say, it's easier to have a conversation when everyone's together and you can read, cues off people, but also understand, how people react, and also really understand the nuances of doing business in a new cultural, new territory. We as a business, we're in, I think, 17 locations, but none of those locations are the same, and we can't do the same thing in a new market which we do in our home market. So, but I think that's one big thing we've missed throughout COVID, and when we haven't been able to travel, is really that face-to-face and making that connection. And you get so much more done in a day being next to someone than you do in a week remotely. So I think that's going to be the big challenge post-COVID, is how that balance is struck between being in person and being remote.
Great, thank you for that, guys. And sort of continuing on, James, when you mentioned about thinking about the cultural side, what would you say are the key considerations when you are looking into globalization, both into and out of the UK? So culture, what else would you say there is?
Yeah, I think if you go into any new country or new territory, you really have to look at it with a fresh pair of eyes. You can't take your home products into that country think it's going to be the same. Air Wallets was originally a Australian company founded in Melbourne, but the Australian and the UK markets are similar, but also they're completely different. The UK markets are a lot bigger, and it was looking at how does your product fit into that market. I think the best bit of advice we can give, or that we found, is really you have to talk to clients or potential clients and really understand what they want. The UK is quite unique in Europe, and we've seen that in terms of fintech, in number of tech companies based out of the UK compared to some other European countries. I think it's a very sort of early adopter culture. So people are a bit more happy to take a risk with new products or services. But yeah, the biggest advice I'd be would talk to clients or potential clients, and don't think just because it works in your home market, it can work in this market. You really have to reevaluate from day one what you're going to do in the market.
Great. Does anyone have any other?
So much true. I can just like say that's very similar to what we saw when taking Awesome from Singapore to the UK, right? So like you look at the similarities of the market and you kind of think that okay, it looks very similar. We just probably can copy paste the strategies and tactics and the like operational things that worked in your home market into the new market. And yeah, like what you discover on the way is that not that simple, right? So the marketing strategy that worked initially wouldn't work in your home country. Even the product, the value proposition that you are selling and that you have in your home country would not necessarily be the one that applies to the new market. And like we see a lot of it, especially in fintech, right? So that there are a few of the European companies like digital banks who were trying to enter the US market, and like whether in Europe like the penetration of debit cards is quite high, and like a lot of people are using debit cards. When you enter the US market, like you'll see that no one cares about debit cards, right? And like you gotta have credit product in there. And yeah, if like we are talking about B2C, the similar thing happening in B2B as well, right? So like however similar market wouldn't be, like you still gotta do a lot of work in market research and stuff, and sometimes even the market research is not enough. So like one of the things that I think Tony mentioned, right? So like you just gotta go there and actually like experience for yourself like how people do business there, like what are the acceptable ways, what are the patterns, and then like you will see what do people use and how your product should be different when you are copying it and like getting into the new territories.
Yeah, I think culture is all important. It really is. I mean, I've worked with many. To give extreme examples, I mean, I've worked with there's a Japanese company that springs to mind that came to London. They set up and recruited 80 people, right, and then didn't listen to any of the people it recruited in terms of what we should do next in this particular market. They were already. This is usually the case with many successful companies in their own domestic markets. They think that model is going to work across different borders, especially if they get a bit of traction in international markets, and they think they can easily replicate that. They go to the time and trouble of recruiting some really intelligent, bright people who understand their local markets, and then they don't listen to them. It's a hierarchical structure thing. It's also a cultural thing. China does something similar, where those people in that hierarchy want to own that relationship when it comes to managing up. And then the managers don't get to hear the very valuable information about how to expand in that particular marketplace. Large companies do it too. From the US too, I've had experiences with companies that rhyme with Google that do exactly the same thing in terms of they don't know the market. And they guess, or they give the responsibility to one person for that entire country who might not have had great experience in that country, and then they come up with a plan, they implement that plan, and then they blame it on someone else. And I think the ones that are smarter is where the founder or the founding team, the people who built these companies, are very close to all those relationships, especially going into new markets. Now, I tend to get co-founders to come over and do it. Because they're connected right with the people making the decisions, and they understand, because they built it in their own country to begin with, how to overcome those problems and to embrace those challenges, and not just pass them down the line to a management team that doesn't know how to handle that or is fearful of it. And that's how you engage with that type of culture. And I've had it the other way, trying to get British companies to go global. You know, it's the same kind of problem. You know, you've got to say, if you're doing business in China, there isn't a China button that you can press and you're live in China. You know, it's about building relationships over time, and you might have to do 10 favors before you get one in return. because that's how you build a relationship there. It's understanding that you're going into a different country. They do business in different ways. And a lot of people don't get that, especially if they've been very successful in their own markets. They tend not to want to change that model until it's too late.
I laugh at the China thing because once upon a time, years ago, we tried to, we were like, China's going to be the next market for us. Let's do it. And obviously we get there and you have to reset everything that you thought was true culturally because like from, coming from the UK, going over into China, it's just everything was completely different. And yeah, definitely we were naive going in, even though we had local Chinese people that we hired and so on. It was just completely different, I think, from like a management point of view, trying to look at how to go to get break into the country, just because it was such a different, like exactly what you said, Tony. You can't take what you've done in one country and replicate it in the next. You have to really adapt your services, your language, everything that needs to change in order to adapt to that specific market. And I think that was definitely a big learning curve. I think going especially into somewhere so culturally different like China, I would suggest going there and actually meeting the people, and taking that time to build up the relationships with the people.
It's part of the fun, isn't it? It's part of the fun of doing.
I loved it.
It's part of the fun of doing and making that leap. That's the most interesting part, isn't it? I've been going to China for over 20 years. And it's changed a lot, and people talk about it as if it's one country. It's not. It's a civilization that's been artificially constrained into this national identity, and it's fascinating going to all different parts of it because it's like going to Europe. We're going to Europe, and it's all these different countries, all their different practices. And try and manage that from one place. You can't. You go to one territory, trying to find that right location that's the best fit and the one that's the best way to experiment with all your new processes in your market is the key to doing that. And I think companies have to learn that, like creating a tiger team to address a key problem, whether that's a technical or a business process one or a monetization problem, that you have to do the same when you're addressing a new market and give up the idea that you're going to make money immediately. Invest a bit of time and money. Give your team time to learn about that new marketplace as you're expanding into it. Of course, with e-commerce is entirely different. You can already sell stuff in there, but there's still going to be problems in terms of import and export, etc.